the way these people operate, you'll notice they're extremely concerned with, like, what about the oppressors, right? It's always what about the oppressors? When it comes to decolonization, for example, indigenous rights, the rights of black people in the USA, etc., when you talk to that about them, and especially if you are a black person talking to them about that, like if you're not incredibly apologetic and incredibly coddling of their feelings, they come at you immediately with, well, but what about all the white people? What, so you want to kill all the white people? If we give you rights, if you have self-determination, you'll kill all the white people. But what about the poor white people? What about the people who've been oppressing you for hundreds and hundreds of years? What about them? They immediately shift the conversation to that. And that's the same thing that the loner box British imperialist Zionist does. You're talking about Palestinian liberation, but Palestinian liberation would inconvenience the Israeli settler colonists. Palestinian liberation can only happen as long as it doesn't inconvenience their oppressors, okay? If the oppressor loses anything, their liberation cannot happen. We cannot advocate for it. This is the trend with these people, right? And it's really no different to the whole great replacement sort of thing, the whole reversal of the oppressor and the oppressed that the right wing in the USA does. They operate with the exact same sort of rhetoric, the exact same turnaround, the exact same everything. You know, like white people, for example, in the US invent those exact same ideas. Black people want to take from us. They want to take what we've got. We're becoming marginalized in our own country. You know, that's the sort of thing that they say. And when someone like Vorsh says to like a black person talking about black liberation, indigenous liberation in the USA, things like, yeah, but what about white people? You want to kill white people. You're so mean to white people. You're an anti-white racist. It's the exact same thing. When Zionist Blairites like Lonerbox say, oh, you want Palestinian liberation? You want Palestinian liberation on Palestinian terms? You want Palestinians to get back what is rightfully theirs? You'll fight for that? You'll advocate for that? Excuse me, but what about the oppressors? What about the Israelis? What do they think about this? These kinds of people, they would 100% defend slavery. Absolutely 100%. Take their minds as they are now, you know, plop their mentality in the head of some white person in the South around the same time. They would defend slavery on the basis that freeing the slaves would come at a financial cost to the poor slave owners. You know, what if we free the slaves and then the blacks breed too much and become a majority? And then us poor white people become a minority in our own country. Oh no. This is the sort of things that they would be saying. It's the exact same talking points. Anyone who is at all concerned with these questions, like, but what about the oppressor? Anyone who asks that when we're talking about the struggle of the oppressed, what they want, you know, things like that, they are a right-winger. They are straight up a right-winger. Leftists don't do this. Leftists never, ever do anything like this. It's a ludicrous fucking talking point. You know that it's coming from a right-wing position because if it's an issue that is convenient for their imperialist bloc, for example, denouncing Russia in Ukraine, they will suddenly shift completely. Ukraine needs to fight to the end. Ukraine needs to fight to the very last man. They would have no problem denouncing any, you know, Russians in Ukraine as oppressors. They have no problem that like Facebook, Twitter, etc. literally made it allowed to call for the deaths of Russian soldiers on their platforms. Do that for the IDF and I'm sure they'd call you like a sadistic bastard or something. So this is the way they operate, right? When it comes to a conflict that advantages them in some way, like the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they become uncompromising. Glory to Ukraine. Ukraine must fight until the end. You said the Azov battalion is bad? No, you can't do that here. That's not allowed. I don't care what Russians want in Ukraine. It's all Ukrainian territory. Then we go to Israel or Palestine.
Feels like he supports
Suddenly,
the Holocaust.
everything changes. The Palestinians need to compromise or they're anti-Semitic. The oppressed indigenous people need to compromise with the settler colonial genociders who stole their homes unless they're anti-Semitic. It's anti-Semitic that they want to get their homes back. We can't do that. There's no room. You don't denounce Hamas for resisting Israel? Wow. Compare that to like what they say about Azov. Hamas is popular among Palestinians because it's the only resistance group that fights back and doesn't directly collaborate with the fucking settler colonial oppressor. So you can see, very fucking easy, the double standard there. You want to know why people are driven to join Hamas? It's because the state of Israel calls itself a special state of the superior Jewish race only for Jews, literally in its law. It's always conceived of itself in that way. When you say that about yourself and then you oppress millions upon millions upon millions of people, you make them hate you, okay? It's your own fault. The number one way to fight anti-Semitism in the Arab world is for Israel to stop oppressing Arab-speaking peoples, to stop dispossessing them, to stop genociding them, to stop occupying their land. It's very fucking simple. Because Israel, in declaring itself, like, obviously inaccurately, to be like the representative of the Jewish people, to be a Jewish ethno-state, etc., it breeds that hatred. And that same sort of hatred was seen in other settler colonial projects too. You think people in Poland weren't driven to hate their German oppressors during World War II? Yeah, they did. There were literally like a Jewish partisan group in Lithuania called Deaf to the Occupiers. They killed settlers. When you oppress people, you breed hatred of you. When you oppress them to such an awful extent, as Israel has done to the Palestinians, as the Nazis did to Jews and Slavs, as the USA did to Native Americans and black people, as most South American countries did to indigenous people, etc. When you do that, you breed them to conceive of you as some sort of fucking Satan, because it becomes impossible to believe that human beings can inflict that sort of thing onto other human beings. It's your own fault, and if you want to fix it, the way to fix it is you stop fucking oppressing them. It's that simple. When Tupac Amaru rose up against the Spanish Empire, an indigenous rebellion against the Spanish Empire, he called white people whiteys. He said, kill whiteys, literally, kill whiteys. It's not his fault. It's not the fault of the other indigenous people who were saying this, that was how they felt. It's the fault of the oppressors. The oppressors conceived of themselves as white. They declared themselves as a special race of people because they were white. They said, we are white, we're better than you. This makes us above you, and this legitimizes our oppression of you. And when you do that, the people you are oppressing are obviously going to say, oh, well, white people are fucking assholes then. They're going to hate you on that basis. You created that basis. It's your fucking fault. If you want to fix it, you stop oppressing them. Very simple. For the advocates of the oppressors, it's the fault of the oppressor. They hate their oppressor. It's the fault of the oppressor. They want to rise up against their oppressor. The oppressed with zero power curiously needs to be the one who accommodates the ones who have all the power. You cannot be a leftist and say the sort of shit that these people. You cannot be a leftist and have your first reaction to, oh, well, the indigenous people should get their land back be, but what about the people who stole the land? What about their rights? Completely ludicrous. Why do Koreans tend to hate Japan? Why do Chinese people tend to hate Japan? Is it because Japan colonized their countries and mass murdered their people and then literally still denies it happened to this day? Yes, that's why. Simple. If Japan wants to fix that, you do that by acknowledging what you did. At least, like, holy shit,